Speaker and my honourable colleagues, I rise today to address Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, and specifically the changes to Section 319.6 and the introduction of Section 319.7 of the Criminal Code. I strongly support protecting religious freedom and ensuring that all Canadians are safe from hate and violence. But Bill C-9 does not do that effectively. I have three serious concerns about Bill C-9. First, it omits the protection of Christians, despite the fact that more than 100 churches have been burned and vandalized in Canada since 2021. Second, it removes the safeguard of the Attorney General's consent under Section 319. This risks hate speech being weaponized as a political tool by any party in power, by letting the government minister decide who gets charged. Third, it waters down the definition of hatred to something so vague and so subjective that it risks encroaching on the very Charter of Rights and Freedoms contained in Section 2B. Beginning with my first objection to Bill C-9, I find it quite perplexing that Christian hate was not even mentioned in the bill. In recent years, we have seen alarming hate-motivated attacks, including burning and vandalism of churches across Canada. Just last week, a century-old Ukrainian Orthodox church in Edmonton was burned to the ground. As we witness a record number of sacred spaces being destroyed, Christians have noticed the government's silence. Congregations have been left in fear, and people of faith feeling abandoned by their government's lack of enforcement of existing laws. In this context, it is shocking that a bill about combating hate is completely silent on the rise of Christian hate. The government's press release mentions anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and transphobia, yet it makes no mention of the rise of hate crimes towards Christians. This bill does not add new protections for worshippers. Instead, it expands state powers by removing the legal safeguards and watering down the definition of hate speech. It paves the path towards politicizing restrictions on speech. It even risks criminalizing dissent to what some would call thought crimes. We must exercise caution. Once such powers are granted to the government, they can be weaponized by any government against its critics. The existing criminal code already covers the most serious offenses. Section 318 makes it a crime to advocate or promote genocide. Section 319 criminalizes public incitement of hatred and willful promotion of hate and speech that would lead to a breach of peace. These provisions already strike a careful balance between protecting Canadians from true hate and safeguarding freedom of expression. Bill C-9 attempts to redefine hatred so vaguely that it risks capturing legitimate debate. We've seen how this plays out elsewhere in the world. In the UK, a man was arrested for holding a blank protest sign because authorities said it could be interpreted as offensive. In Australia, parents were investigated for hate speech after questioning gender policies at their school. In New Zealand, academics were threatened with jail for quoting banned manifestos. Canada is not immune. We are crossing into a dangerous line of removing the provincial attorney general's consent and oversight and leaving charges in the hands of a minister appointed by the Prime Minister. This Liberal government has given us reason to believe that they will weaponize hate speech laws against their political opponents for political gain. Bill C-9 introduces a second significant change by adding a subjective, emotionally driven definition of hatred that lowers the threshold that was essentially set by the Supreme Court of Canada. As you know, as many of you know, this is important because hatred is not defined in our criminal code. Rather, it is the meaning is developed over decades through case law, the most notable being 2013 Supreme Court case of Saskatchewan v. Whatcott. In that case, the term hatred was defined as must be interpreted as meaning extreme manifestation of emotions described by words, detestation, and vilification, and should not include representations that merely discredit, offend, or insult. That objective standard set by the Supreme Court protects freedom of expression while targeting real harm. This Liberal government seeks to overturn that Supreme Court definition with Bill C-9 by replacing that decision with Section 319.7, which is found in C-9. In this new section, the Liberal government wishes to redefine hatred as the emotion that involves detestation or vilification, and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. By removing the word extreme, it lowers the threshold that the Supreme Court has set and that has been put in place to protect free speech. By focusing on emotion rather than extreme manifestation, the government's new definition shifts attention to feelings rather than actual harm. Under the Liberal Bill C-9, citizens may self-censor. Prosecutors also gain wide discretion to pursue cases based on perceived emotion, not demonstrable harm. This creates a real risk that individuals may be penalized for strong dissent, or even without intent to incite hatred. So why does this matter? It's important to recognize that these harmful sections in Bill C-9 can cause real issues to freedom of speech. It's because removing the Attorney General consent and watering it down to the definition of hatred directly threatens our fundamental freedom of expression contained in Section 2B of the Charter. Once charged with hate speech, a person's life could be ruined long before a verdict, careers lost, reputations destroyed, families fractured. Bill C-9 amounts to cancel culture that is enforced by government power. Hatred against Christians, Jews, Muslims, or any faith group must be laws that protect against that must be enforced, and they exist under existing laws contained in Section 318 and 319. Bill C-9 doesn't create new protections. It creates a fake law. It pretends to fight hate while really concentrating power in the hands of Ottawa. By removing the Attorney General's oversight and inserting a vague new definition of hatred, this bill gives the government the tools to harass dissenters and weaponize the law for political gain. Colleagues, hate is real, and it must always be confronted. But we do not confront hate by weakening democracy. We do not confront hate by stripping away safeguards, criminalizing emotion, and centralizing power in Ottawa. The true test of democracy is not how we treat speech that we agree with, but how we protect the freedom of those with whom we profoundly disagree. Bill C-9 fails that test. It risks turning the coercive apparatus of the state into a weapon of dissent. I stand here not just as a member of Parliament for the good people of Haldimand, Norfolk, or as a lawyer, but as a Canadian and as a Christian who believes that freedom of expression is sacred. We already have laws that protect genuine hatred. We must now guarantee against governments that use language of protection as a cloak of control. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Question and commentaire. The Honourable Member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do appreciate the member opposite bringing up the issue of the use of legislation as a political tool. I've seen that firsthand in Hamilton, where activist members of the community use accusations of hatred and racism as a tool to silence political opposition. But let's be clear, that is not what is happening here. That is not what is in this bill. And the member opposite knows full well what the intentions and the purpose of this bill are. So why doesn't she stand with members of her own community that are supportive, members of minority communities, members of police forces across Canada that are supportive of this bill, support what is being asked for as a necessary protection to those groups across Canada? Thank you.
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
I thank the member for his thoughtful question. Mr. Speaker, I stand with members of all communities that are subject to hate. And what we do know is that the current criminal code has already contained within it sections that deal with hate. And this law is not about that. This law is about the concentration of government power so that it could be weaponized against dissenters. Mr. Speaker, Section 319(2) protects against hate symbols. Section 423, intimidation. Section 430, mischief of religious groups. These things are already in the criminal code. What the Liberals need to do is to enforce the law.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Haldeman North for her passion and informed speech. Like a lot of people in this House, I spend a lot of time visiting places of faith. Only one in all of Edmonton, whether Christian, Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, actually has to have a police car out front at all times, and that is at our local synagogue. And that is a reflection of the rise in crime under this government. I wonder if my colleague sees anything in this bill that's going to stop this kind of hate that forces the Edmonton Police Service to offer up police protection only for one specific faith.
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
I thank the member for that question. And I believe it was yesterday, no, a few days ago, we listened to the impassioned speech from the member from Toronto Centre, who is a person of Jewish heritage, Jewish faith. And it became very clear that this bill was not designed to protect that community. Existing right now are people of the Jewish faith who cannot even shop in grocery stores in a kosher line without being assaulted. And yet we have crimes on the book that are not being enforced. People are charged and then the charges are dismissed. We need to uphold the rule of law. We need to uphold the laws in the criminal code that are on this book, that exists currently, rather than creating a fake law that makes people feel good, but that just allows the government to weaponize dissent.
Here, here.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. L'honourable député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to return to the religious exemption. The government showed some openness to possibly studying it if opposition parties moved it as an amendment in committee. Here's what I would like to know. Do our Conservative colleagues share our point of view? Do they agree that it's important that we debate this issue, which is currently ongoing in the streets of Quebec?
Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that when we're dealing with religious freedoms, that every issue should be on the table, and we should have the capacity to sit down and have meaningful discussions about things that we disagree on. And that is the essence of freedom of expression, that we should be able to have discussions from all over the country. And that is why the Attorney General's consent on the charges of hate speech is so important, because it allows geographical input from different provinces, which is channeled through the Attorney General. And that's why it's very egregious that this C-9 would consider removal of the Attorney General's consent.
Resuming debate. Reprise du débat.